Greetings and salutations, and thank you for clicking on this video. This is our Q&A episode number 7. So this is the one for July 2016. And before we get into answering your comments, let me first say thank you very much for all of the great comments that you guys have posted lately. I do not have time to respond to everything that everybody posts, but I do make a great effort to read everything that everybody posts. So a lot of times if you ask a question, somebody who is already in the community may jump up and answer that question, and if I don't get to your question, well, I'm sorry. It's volume at this point. There are so many comments. And one thing that I did want to point out is that I get a lot of simple questions that are asked over and over and over again, and I try to respond to as many as I can. I understand that if you're a newbie and you're first starting out with Linux, that you do have a lot of questions. But what I would say is that before you post a question anywhere, whether it be in the comments section here or whether it be in another forum somewhere, make sure that you do your research first. A lot of simple Linux questions are very easy to answer, and all you have to do is do a Google search and it comes up pretty quick. And so do that first before you reach out in a forum somewhere. Some Linux forums, they tend to get kind of nasty if they figure out that you haven't done your research first. And you may find yourself getting talked to in a way that you don't like, because it's just the folks who volunteer in those forums, they answer a lot of questions, and they answer questions over and over again, and after a while it does get a little frustrating. So that's something to keep in mind. Before you reach out anywhere, make sure that you've done your research and you've read the documentation for the distribution of Linux that you're using. If you can't find the answer, or if it's something that you don't understand, please feel free to ask. Of course, just make sure that you explain, I'm new, I've looked, and I haven't found an answer to it. So that's just something I want to put out there. It'll make your journey through the world of Linux a lot more pleasant if you understand that when you're reaching out to folks in the community. So let's go ahead and look at some of the questions that I have chosen to answer in this video. And the first one comes from David Locklear. He says, I think I have an easy question. I installed Mint 18 Cinnamon on my SSD. I forgot that the version I had on my USB stick was the beta version. It installed fine, and I ran all the updates except level 5. Well, I would go ahead and install the level 5 updates. Okay, it makes more sense to me to go ahead and do that. Anyway, his question was, does that get me up to date with LTS version, or is there another trick I need to do? No, if you install all of the updates, even if you installed from the beta, then you are now on the latest version of Linux Mint. So if you have one of those beta images around and you install from it, you'll be just fine. I think the only thing that Linux Mint actually recommended, if you were going from the beta to the standard release and using the update system, in other words, you installed the beta and then you went into the standard release, the only thing that I saw they said was that you should uninstall Samba if you're not going to use it, because the beta release had Samba installed by default, as does Linux Mint 17 series, and they decided that they were not going to install Samba by default with the Linux Mint 18 release. But if it's not bothering you and doesn't make any difference, you don't have to fool with it. It's just something that they decided to change. One more question. The Linux kernel guru is recommending everybody upgrade to 4.6.4. Is he talking to newbies, or is he just talking to developers? Well, I don't know who he's talking to, because what kernel version you get depends a great deal on the distribution that you're using. And in the case of Linux Mint, which is based on Ubuntu, Ubuntu is currently maintaining kernel version 4.4 and will continue to do that for quite some time here. That is the latest kernel that you can get with Ubuntu 16.04. I don't remember exactly which revision they're on, but what they do is they take a kernel and then they maintain it themselves. So they actually are not going along with what the kernel comes from the the Linux Foundation. And when, you see this all the time, upgrade to 4.6 or whatever, and the truth of the matter is that most people out there, depending on what distribution you are on, you're probably at this point you could be on anything from kernel 4.2 all the way to kernel 4.4. I think probably if you're running Arch, you probably get the latest kernel if you have it set up to do that. But in a long-term support release, usually you're going to be on a long-term support kernel, and which is kernel 4.4, and that's one of the reasons that Ubuntu is maintaining it. And so therefore Linux Mint goes along with what Ubuntu does. And if you set the update manager to upgrade the kernels, then it will upgrade your kernels for you. They also have a kernel tool in there that you can go to the latest kernel. But the truth of the matter is that being on the latest greatest kernel only helps you if you have hardware that absolutely needs to be on that kernel. And the other thing is that for, like I said, long-term support releases, they usually hang with a very stable kernel and they kind of stick back with it. So I realize that is very confusing. But Linux Mint 18 now automatically upgrades the kernel if you choose the option to allow the system to do that, whereas Linux Mint 17 didn't do that. You have to upgrade your kernel manually, and you use the kernel tool. And for Linux Mint 17.3, I think that right now I've got all my systems on kernel 4.2, 3.8 or something like that, and it seems to be working out very, very well. And even though they do offer the ability to get, I think you can get kernel 4.4 on Linux Mint 17.3, but I decided to hang back and stay with the 4.2 kernel simply because of the fact, number one, it's working, and number two, I was kind of afraid to do kernel 4.4 with the older system. Might break something. So yeah, that's something to do a lot of research on. And I mean, he's talking mainly to advanced Linux users. He's talking to developers there who want to have the latest and greatest. Or, I mean, if you're running Arch Linux or something like that, then you can, Arch, I think, just gives you the latest kernel, whatever that is, as soon as it appears. So an Arch user that hasn't set their system up to be on a long-term support kernel is probably on 4.6 or 4.7 or whatever's coming out now. But like I said, Ubuntu pretty much takes care of it, so it's not something you have to worry too much about. Let's do Ahmed's question here. He says, great video, very nice, thanks a lot. I hope you make a video about sharing Linux Mint with Android and Windows 10. I already done that with Windows and Android, but have many problem with Linux to make both devices can access each other. Not I am in it, but all my work was Windows from 95 or 10 or Windows Server, but I am new to Linux and I try to learn more. Till now I find it very useful. Hope you tell me about some source to learn from. Thanks a lot. I'm sorry. Okay, well, first of all, I do not run Windows anywhere at this point. Everything that I do is all Linux. So a lot of people do ask me all the time, well, how do you do this with Windows and how do you do that with Windows? And the truth of the matter is I don't know and I can't demonstrate it. You can use Samba to interface with Windows, but the last operating system that I tried to do that with was Windows 7. And so I have no idea how you would do it with 10. I'd imagine it would be pretty much the same way. But over the last year or two, to tell you the truth, gang, I haven't been using Samba at all. I have found other alternatives because Samba is a big pain in the ass. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. And when I changed ISPs, the Samba just didn't work with the router that I have. And I've been on the phone with the tech support folks from my ISP, and they don't know why it doesn't work, and I don't know why it doesn't work, and I've looked through the manual, and they've looked through it, and we can't figure it out. So I stopped using Samba altogether, And right now, if I want to transfer files from one computer to the next, I do it using SSH and the the SCP command, the secure copy command, to get files from one computer to the other. That's a very robust way of doing it. I realize that not everybody wants to do that. And I do have a video up that explains how to configure Samba so that it will be very easy to access from Windows machines and Android devices and things like that. And you can certainly give it a try, but for whatever reason, it quit working entirely for me, and I just threw up my hands and said, I'm not going to deal with it. So sorry that I'm not being super helpful with that question there, but I don't even bother with it anymore as far as like trying to share things on computers. I use, like I said, I'm using SSH, and I use the secure copy command and move things back and forth across the network that way, and that seems to work actually a lot better than Samba ever did. So you can check that out. Linux Mint, up until Linux Mint 18, had Samba pre-configured, and supposedly you were supposed to be able to just right-click on any folder anywhere and share it, and then it would show up on the network, and it never really worked the way it was supposed to. So now the Linux Mint folks have decided that they're going to drop Samba support by default. When the system installs, you'll have to install that manually, and probably a good idea at this point. It's just Samba needs work, and I don't think people are paying a lot of attention to it. But it is possible. And you can also use NFS shares with Linux and Windows as long as the Windows system will support NFS. But how that's done, I really don't know. So, sorry I couldn't be of much help, but I did want to make sure that I pointed out any question that has to do with Windows 10 or whatever, I can't really help you with it. I don't run it, and I don't know. I don't really know a whole lot about the system, nor do I care to know. So, there you go. Next question, a couple of short ones. In one of your videos, you had some negative things to say about UEFI. Can you talk about what that is and why and how you turn it off? Well, first of all, let's talk about what it is. I have this up here. You can check this Wikipedia article out. It's the United Extensible Firmware Interface. And many computers that have been that have come out in the last 2 or 3 years have this set up by default. I think Microsoft finally said, well, this is how we're going to do it, and all the hardware manufacturers that wanted to run Windows had to implement the system. There is also a secure boot feature, and basically what this does is it tries to link the operating system to the firmware on the computer, and it adds some functionality that wasn't available in the older standard BIOS system, basic input-output system that was used up until EFI, and then UEFI came along. And the thing about it is it makes it extremely hard to do things like dual boots. It makes it very difficult for somebody to install Linux on their computer, especially if they don't understand how all of this works. And so it's the positive is supposed to be that you have a more secure experience, because then somebody can't come along and take your computer and boot it up off of a boot disk or a USB stick and get to your data and all that stuff. It makes it harder for somebody to get into the system, and it adds functionality. However, on the flip side of that, it makes it difficult to install a third-party operating system. And most Linux distributions these days, especially the major distributions, they all are UEFI compatible. But even to install like Ubuntu or Linux Mint or Fedora or something like that, you're probably going to have to get into the BIOS and turn secure boot off, because the system will not boot the new operating system until you tell it how to do it. And unfortunately, this is different for every manufacturer, and every computer does it a little bit different. So it makes it very difficult to have a step-by-step guide to put up in and tell anybody how to do this, because everybody does it differently. And so therefore, you pretty much have to go from machine to machine and figure out how to do this. Now, most computers that are out today will allow you to just simply turn it off. You can go in there, you can go into the setup, and you can say, I don't want UEFI, I don't want secure boot on, and it will fall back to a basic input-output system or BIOS setup. And I prefer to use that because with a BIOS system, you can swap hard drives in and out of the machine. I can install Linux on one machine, and then if that machine dies, I can take that drive out and I can put it in another machine as long as I'm not running any proprietary drivers. And it's just a lot easier to work with. So therefore, my solution for dealing with UEFI is just to turn it off. And so that's what it is, and that's what it does. But I have done installs on some machines where I've left it on and allowed the operating system like Ubuntu or whatever to go ahead and do that. It depends on the client, depends on what they want to do with their machine. And as far as setting up a dual boot with Windows 10 and any Linux distribution is concerned, that's something that I really don't want to do. I've tried to do it with a couple of clients. We haven't had great success. Some people can get that to work, some people can't. But it is not super easy. It's not a matter of like the one-click dual boot option during the installation process. No, you have to do a lot of things. You have to go into Windows, and there's many steps in the process. So I try and avoid it if at all possible. And you know, a lot of people ask me all the time, how do I set up a dual boot between Ubuntu or Linux Mint or whatever and Windows 10? And I go, good luck. Just have fun doing that yourself. So it's not something that I'm willing to get into at this point. I'm not a huge fan of dual booting anything anyway, and that video still gets a ton of comments on it. I had one long comment from one guy the other day who said that who did not understand what I was trying to say in that video and decided to start typing this long-winded thing about whatever, and I had to set him straight. I was like, yeah, you missed the point, gang. It's just I don't like dual boots. I avoid them if I can. So I hope that answers your question. My solution to it, my solution to the UEFI problem is to just turn it off whenever I can. Okay, so the last one here, I think. No, I got one more. Please, can you do a video about reinstalling Network Manager? Okay, those of you who are using Ubuntu-based distributions on 1604 may or may not have run into the infamous Network Manager bug. I'm hoping that the Network Manager bug is going to be fixed very soon here. A little bit later on this month, Ubuntu is going to release 1604.1, and hopefully that one is going to solve that problem and have all the updates and it won't be an issue. But in the meantime, one of the things that I found that you can do to kind of fix the problem, sometimes make it work a little better, is to just reinstall it. And this is true of any Linux software at all. If you have a piece of software that is acting up and it's not working right, sometimes to fix it, you can just reinstall the software. And the tool that I like to use is Synaptic Package Manager. Now, Synaptic Package Manager is available on any Debian or Ubuntu-based system, and it should either be installed by default or you can go get it. Unfortunately, on Ubuntu 1604, Synaptic Package Manager is not installed by default, and you have to actually go to the Software Center and install it, and the name of the package is Synaptic. You can do that from the Software Center or do it from a terminal, whatever makes you happy, and then you'll have this lovely little tool. So what it allows you to do is you can search for things. Let's do a search here for Network Manager. Alright, so there's Network Manager, and you see we have all this stuff. I'm going to sort it by what's installed here. Alright. So now we have all of this stuff that is Network Manager related. And what you would do is just go through here, and anything that is highlighted there, well, actually, we can just do all of it. Just highlight it all like this. I'm holding the Control key and clicking. This is all the stuff that's installed for Network Manager. Right click, mark for reinstallation. And if we mark it for reinstallation and then we click apply, it will actually reinstall all of these things that have to do with Network Manager. And that's as easy as it gets. Now, it may throw an error. It may not work. You may have to restart the computer because it's going to have to stop the Network Manager service in systemd or upstart or whatever happens to be going on there. And okay, like for instance in Linux Mint 17.3, they're using upstart, which is the initialization system, and in Linux Mint 18 they're using systemd. If you don't know what that means, don't worry about it, okay? But it's going to have to restart the network manager service. This may solve a lot of problems. And like I said, you can do this with any Linux software. So for instance, if Firefox is giving you a great deal of trouble here, we'll do a search for Firefox. Okay, do the same thing. Find everything that's related to Firefox. Highlight it. Okay, and now we're going to right click. Okay, this is now marked for reinstallation. We'll apply it. Do it. So it's going to go out and download the packages that it needs. Basically what we're doing here is a manual update. We are forcing the system to reinstall all the stuff. Oh. And when this is done, you can relaunch the software and hopefully it'll be working better and it'll be alright. So I'm going to go ahead and let that finish that since I actually started that process. And we'll go back over here and move on to a new question. By the way, there's really not any other fixes that I know about Network Manager. There's a lot of people up there that have done a lot of different things, but that actually seemed to help me when I was running Linux Mint 18 in beta, and it also helped with Ubuntu Mate. Just reinstall it. Okay, this is kind of a comment that I wanted to this is really not a question, it's just a comment. I like the concept of a central repository. However, I was very disappointed when I learned that the vast majority of packages never get any update at all. I think you should note in your video that the update everything all at once only applies to a very small subset. Nice video anyway. Okay, so why would a piece of software that is working and it is not presenting a security risk need an update? If a piece of software is working and the developer is content with what it's doing and doesn't feel like adding new features at that moment, then it doesn't require an update. Okay? So I don't quite know what you read. I don't know what the deal was, but yes, a lot of the stuff that's in the repositories for many Linux distributions is relatively static, just simply because if it works, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. But the updates that you need to get are on internet-facing applications. So that is why if you look at your updates, you'll notice that you're constantly getting updates for browsers, email clients, anything that has to do with the internet. Those are your security risks. The game that has been in the repository for the last 5 years and hasn't changed, that you can download and play, is not presenting any kind of security risk unless the developer wants to do some sort of new update on it and add new features and that sort of thing. So I'm just saying that I don't know what you read and I don't know what they said, but that's what I say. If it ain't broke, don't fix it. It's no big deal. And if that's something that bothers you, then maybe you're one of those folks who is willing to take the risk of using a rolling release. Even in rolling releases without fixed release dates, you don't get updates for every single thing on the system and every program that's in the repositories. You'll only get the updates when you need an update to whatever program it is, or the developers themselves decide to move to another version, then you'll get it. The repositories for the different releases in Ubuntu, okay, so right now we're on Ubuntu, the old long-term support release is 14.04. So the 14.04 releases do have a lot of older software in it. simply because some of that software has not been replaced in the repositories for 2 years, or the maintainers have not rolled in new releases for whatever reason. But it's kind of a trade-off. You know you're getting software that's a little bit older, but that software is considered stable. And if you want to manually upgrade a piece of software to a new package, there are ways that you can do that. Most developers provide PPAs that you can hook up, and you can get the daily builds of a lot of packages by hooking up that PPA. So you deprecate what's in the main repository, and then you choose to get it from another repository which has a more up-to-date version, and that's how you deal with that sort of situation. And for me, I really don't fool around with it much. There are some packages that I kind of wish were more up-to-date in Ubuntu 14.04. I'm not really using it. Linux Mint does a better job of making sure that they have the latest versions of things like LibreOffice available, or if not the latest version, at least a later version, because I think maybe Ubuntu 14.04 is still on version 4.3 or something like that, and everybody else is on 5 point something. But in Linux Mint, they tend to make sure that you get the later versions of dynamic applications like that. So don't be discouraged. It's just a different way of doing things, and like I said, there's 35,000 applications in the Ubuntu repositories. Not every one of those applications is going to get an update every day. So that's basically my take on that. You know, you read a lot of stuff out there. I mean, it's part of the thing about the Linux community is everybody's got an opinion, and they have no problems posting it on the internet. There's a lot of hecack that goes back and forth about, well, this distro sucks and this distro is great, and they don't like the way that this distro does something, and it goes both ways. And if you're kind of new to Linux, that can get really confusing because you don't know who to listen to. And a lot of it you need to just take with a grain of salt. I tend to have a little bit of faith in the maintainers of the repositories. I like the idea of a curated repository a lot because, first of all, it makes installation easy, and second of all, I don't have to worry about whether this piece of software is going to work, whether it's going to trash my machine. I don't have to worry about whether it's got junkware in it, because the curators of the repositories, they pretty much watch what goes in there and make sure that that sort of thing doesn't happen. And of course, we're moving into a new era here where we have Flatpaks and Snap packages coming along, which are going to be quote-unquote universal package managers for Linux. I mean, that's the goal, is to try and come up with something that works across all of the distros so that it makes it easier for developers. My one concern about that is it's going to make it easier for developers to cram junk in there too, especially if they are, you know, like right now, if you have a PPA, then that's through Launchpad. So somebody's looking at what's in the PPA. Somebody somewhere is paying attention to it. The Snap packages are going to be able to be hosted on developers' sites. At least that's what I'm given to understand. If I'm wrong, then, you know, I'll take it back. But I have heard that you can have, right now, if you want to do a Snap package, you have to have a Launchpad account, and which is fine. But I think within the system, there's a provision where, you know, junkware.com can have a Snap repository on their website, and then they can offer people downloads to get the Snap, you know, which will have junkware for Linux in it. I hope that doesn't happen. But it's very early days on, you know, Snappy packages and Flatpaks, those two systems that are out there right now. And so we're just going to sit back and watch that develop and see how it goes along. And you know, I have no desire to be on the cutting edge. I said that in one of the recent videos I did. I don't care about being on the cutting edge. What I care about more than anything else is that it works, and that when I sit down in front of my computer and I have things to get done, that I'm not going to be fighting the software or going, well, that's got a bug in it or whatever. I don't want to deal with that. I don't want to spend time troubleshooting problems with my system. So therefore, I have gotten to a place where I try and use stable distributions. Linux Mint 17.3 is on 2 of my machines. Ubuntu Mate 16.04 is on another. They're very stable. They work very well. I have no problems. I'm not going to be changing that. No, I have no no desire to be on a rolling release. I don't want to deal with things breaking. Just that simple. So snap packages don't do a whole lot for me at this point. But later on down the road here, I think they're going to become very significant. And I think it's actually, I'm optimistic that it's going to help Linux quite a bit, because it makes it easier for developers to get the software out there. And then it really doesn't matter what distribution you happen to be running. You can actually use that software. And there's some other advantages to it as well. Okay, I'm done. That's it for this video. Thank you for watching. Thank you for all your comments. Be sure and check out EzeeLinux on Facebook and give it a like if you would. Check out EzeeLinux on the web. Learn more about how EzeeLinux works as far as me being able to help you get started with Linux on a one-on-one basis. Also check out freedompenguin.com for lots of great articles about Linux. I haven't posted anything at Freedom Penguin in quite some time, but I'm kind of taking it easy as far as generating content is concerned. A lot of things going on. It's summertime around here. Got family coming in from in town and things like that. So I'm kind of enjoying that. And there's plenty of old articles and lots of great stuff here on the YouTube channel for you to keep you guys entertained. You can go back and rewatch all the old videos, gang. I'll come up with some new ones a little bit later on down the road. So anyway, that's it. Thank you for watching. We'll talk again soon.